Hello guys, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Petra and welcome if you are new here. This video is going to be part 2 of things I wish I knew before I started writing my bachelor thesis. If you guys haven't already watched the part 1, I highly recommend that you watch it, especially if you are writing your thesis this year or this semester. I am talking about sort of the prep work that you should do before writing your thesis, which is about selecting the topic of your thesis and selecting your supervisor. It is pretty comprehensive, so you should definitely check it out. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about searching for the literature and doing your research. Also, I'm gonna be sharing with you some tips on writing your thesis, so like stuff that I did that helped me out with writing it. And I'm also gonna be talking about the oral defense and how to prepare for it. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. One of the first things that I would highly recommend doing is to look into what kind of resources your university provides for you. For example, my university has a university library, and at this library we have some seminars about a lot of things. For example, like how to properly do the citations, about how to use like these online e-resources, for example EBSCO or ProQuest, and how you can use it to search for articles, how to search for articles on Google Scholar and stuff like that. So I would highly recommend to check if you have something like this at your university, because it's super helpful. So now let's talk about literature and resources. So first I'm gonna tell you sort of what I did to find all the literature for my thesis. So first of all, I had some sort of like recommended literature by my supervisor. Perhaps if your supervisor is an expert in the field that you are writing about, you can ask them for recommendations. I think it's definitely very useful. Another way how you can find literature is to search through some old theses that are about the same topic. So what I did was that I looked at the master's thesis that were sort of about the same thing. I kind of looked at what resources they used, and some that looked trustworthy I used as well. Another way how you can find resources is obviously in a library. You guys can use your university library, or you can even use some other institution. For example, I like to use the library of Czech National Bank because they also have a lot of literature regarding my major. There definitely is another institution besides your university that has books that you need, maybe the Library of Academy of Sciences or something like that. So in case you don't find what you're looking for in your university library, you don't have to be discouraged. So now let's talk about electronic databases. My university library has a website where they have all the information about all the databases that we have access to, and these include, for example, EBSCO and ProQuest, and you can use these databases to search for some articles in these scientific journals. Another way to search for these scientific articles is Google Scholar, which is basically like a search engine of academic articles, and most of these articles are actually paid. My university has this special link. It will sort of like link you through to the article in the database that the school has already access to. If your university is sort of like a big institution, I'm sure that they must have something similar to this, or you can search for some other big institution, perhaps another university in your city that is kind of bigger and that has access to a lot of databases, and you can join these for a little amount of money and have access to so many things. Another database that I was using when I was writing my thesis was Amadeus, which is basically like a database of financial informations and annual reports of different businesses in Europe. This is kind of accounting specific, but it's also a very well-known resource. But there are also like a lot of other databases such as Passport. There are a lot of things that you can use. So just ask your supervisor, look at what your library has access to, because these could be really great resources that could help your thesis a lot. Another database that I would like to highlight is ProQuest eBook Central. If you are searching for some book, I would highly recommend checking out the ProQuest eBook Central if your library has an access to it, because it's a really great resource.
So now let's talk about the writing tips. The first thing that I recommend doing before you start writing your thesis is to define the aim of your thesis, so that you have some sort of intention behind your thesis and some sort of general idea where you want to go. I know that it might sound a bit scary, but it's not something that is set in stone, and you can adjust it as you are writing your thesis. The second thing that I would recommend doing is to write an outline of what you want to have in the thesis, and then point out the most important parts and start writing those parts first. To give you an example, the core of my thesis were some of the IFRS standards, so I decided to start writing those first because I knew that I had to write them at some point anyways, so I might as well just start with those.
Another thing that really helped me with writing my thesis was, especially if I had an electronic resource like an ebook or like a document that I downloaded from somewhere, or like an article or whatever, was that I would take these snippets of these articles and I would copy paste it into a Google Doc in the order of how I wanted it in my thesis. And I would just make like this giant Google Doc. Also, you have to mark like every source to make sure that you know, you don't mess it up and then cite something wrongly. And then I would just paraphrase everything straight into my thesis. I also made a special Google Doc where every time I wanted to delete something that I was writing in my thesis, especially because I was translating long paragraphs, so I would just always copy paste it into this special Google Doc and delete it from the thesis. And in case later I would regret that I deleted this part, I would go back to this Google Doc. So when I was writing my thesis, the software that I was using was Microsoft Word. And it was because for writing the thesis we had this sort of template that we should follow, which was in Microsoft Word. So that's why I had to do that. Also, the functionality when it comes to formatting text and stuff like that in Microsoft Word is definitely more advanced than in Google Docs, even though personally I am a fan of the cloud solutions because you don't have to click save all the time and you can access it from anywhere. However, unfortunately for writing a thesis, it wasn't really an optimal solution. Even the cloud version of Microsoft Word isn't as good as the desktop version. However, I would always make sure that I save my thesis on a cloud in case something would happen with my computer, so that I could still access it. If you have some sort of sensitive data in your thesis, I don't know if it's really a great idea to save it on a cloud, but if it's just like something normal, you know, nothing really sensitive, then you can definitely save it on a cloud. My recommendation of how you should name the file is year, month, day, and then underscore whatever you want, and this way it will always be like perfectly organized because of the numbers. This is what I learned in my job in the law firm. Let's talk about the oral defense. So basically what an oral defense is that you are gonna talk about your thesis in front of a committee, and they are gonna ask you some questions to confirm that you actually wrote the thesis, or at least that's how it works at my university. I'm sure every university can have it a bit different. Essentially, you have your thesis supervisor and your opponent, and these people read your thesis and they evaluate whether or not they think that your thesis is good enough to go to oral defense. And also they will ask you questions about your thesis, which you will receive. I received my questions a week prior my oral defense, and it was just basically about what I wrote in my thesis, or something like a little bit outside the scope of the thesis, but something that I technically should know because I wrote the thesis. Basically, you just prepare for these questions, and on top of that, you should also prepare some sort of a presentation of your thesis. I just took the most important data from the thesis. You definitely should avoid saying something that is obvious, because in the committee there are probably going to be experts in that field who know more about these things than you. So you should avoid saying something that is super obvious and that they already know. And what I highly recommend doing is writing everything that you want to say in your presentation and just learn it by heart, because even though this might seem kind of unnecessary, it's gonna save you so much stress. I would practice my speech while doing the dishes or when I was getting ready in the morning. This way I just learn it by heart, and at the oral defense I appeared very confident. So this is why I would recommend that you do this. Another advice when it comes to presentation skill, and something that took me like very long to figure out, is that it's okay if you speak slowly. Because when you speak slowly, you have more time to think about what you're gonna say, and it's gonna be less likely that you stumble upon your own words, and you will appear even more confident. And especially when you learn something by heart, then it's gonna be easier to think about what to say next. So just speak slowly and you will be fine. So guys, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm debating on whether or not to make sort of a sequel and talk about some accounting specific advice that I have about thesis, because there is a lot that I didn't know and I wish I knew just regarding like writing a thesis on accounting. But I know that this is kind of like a niche topic, so I don't know if it's a really good idea. But if you have any questions regarding like writing thesis about accounting, shoot me a DM on Instagram and perhaps I would be able to help you. But sometimes maybe I wouldn't know either, but whatever. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one. Bye!